Hey, what's up, guys? Mark Conley here, founder of Daily Soccer Skills, and today I wanted to talk to you a little bit about an email that I got from a parent who she wrote in, and she's just having some anxiety about tryouts for her daughter. So what had happened is, her daughter's been playing soccer for about 4 years now, and she's really interested in making a team that's like a higher level. And so, a couple of things like kind of bounced off the page to me, like that I wanted to kind of address because that's a very, very common thing for parents. So I kind of want to break this down to like really three parts. We'll call it pre-tryouts, tryouts, and post-tryouts. And so before we even get into pre-trials and post-tryouts, come to grips with like a simple like idea of, let's just say like there's going to be 15 players on the first team and 15 players on a second team, just hypothetically. Would you rather be like number 14 or 15 on a first team or number 1 or 2 on a second team? And so, as a parent, I get this, we want to push our kids, we want to test them, we want them to, be tested and overcome and succeed, right? And, the thing that you have to understand is that, there's no guarantees. I recently went skydiving and, I jumped out of a perfectly good airplane, and there was no guarantees when I jumped out of that airplane that chute was going to open. And so I share that with you because when you take a child and if you put them in an environment that's over top of their head, there's no guarantee that they're going to overcome it, succeed, and thrive. I've had situations where players do exactly that. You give them that environment and there's boom, exponential steroids, level. It was exactly what they needed. I had a kid join my team who came from a very low level team, and 2 years later he's getting called into national team camps. You know what I mean? So it's it can happen. It's not often, but it can happen. But I've also had a lot more instances of the other situation where I gave a kid a chance. His dad was like, he can do it. His mom was like, he's got this. He just really needs this. And so I gave him a chance, and then the kid's kind of slowly but surely over time starts shrinking into himself because he didn't quite have the personality and the flair and that competitive desire to thrive at that level. And there's nothing wrong with that, by the way, because what happened is the next year he went down to the second team and had a fantastic year. So the question that you have to ask yourself is would you rather be the top dog, the big fish in the small pond, or a little fish in a big pond? If you're on the cuffs there. So come to grips with that, and then now let's just kind of talk a little bit about pre-tryouts. What are some strategies that we can be doing pre-tryouts? And so one of the things that I like to encourage players to do, and I'll just use my own club experience for an example. We get 2, maybe 3 days of tryouts, right? And we get 100 to 150, sometimes 175 kids out. You've got maybe 10 coaches out there that are doing the work. And if you start doing the amount of time that each coach has to evaluate each player, it comes down to sometimes, I've actually done the math, it comes down to a minute a player. So if you can kind of get on the front foot a little bit, and if you can email the coach ahead of schedule and say, hey, listen, I'd love to have little Johnny come out and train with your team. We've got tryouts coming out. I just kind of want to see where he is. If is he kind of on that level? And most coaches are going to let you do that unless they're preparing for a big tournament or a state cup or something like that. They should let you come out and have a little run in, and it just might be one training session. They're like, yeah, he's good, but he's not good enough, and that's fine too. Or they'll say he's decent, he's keep him coming out. So it can go either way, but you won't know unless you ask. And so it's just a simple phone call, text, email, something like that. So in the pre-tryout stage, just trying to kind of get into that team and have some runs, and that's going to help also your kid with the familiarity with that team, so that come tryout day they don't have this little complex they're dealing with. They've had a few sessions with them. So the other thing for pre-tryouts is you can really be working on your training, your touches, and your fitness. That way, just when you go to tryouts, you just want everything to be really clean and neat. And a lot of times, if you haven't played in a month and your first touches are at tryouts, don't be surprised if that has an impact on your results. You should be doing some work a few weeks leading up to tryouts, so that at least your touches are sharp, your fitness is good, and things like that. So let's talk about the actual tryout day. And the actual tryout day is this is really, really important. And so this is, I'm aware of this, so it doesn't impact me as a coach. It's the way I've seen it impact other coaches, but it's something that I'm going to give you, and you can use to your favor if you want to. Dress the part. of the player. And so, like for example, if there's a kid that's out at training, all right, or at a tryout, and he's got, a tie-dye shirt on and a pair of sweatpants, and he's a good player, right? And you've got a kid that's like got like the Barcelona kit, and he's like all decked out and everything. So think about the conversation that happens between coaches. Hey, so what'd you think of the kid in the tie-dye shirt and the sweatpants? Oh, he's pretty good player. What'd you think of the Barcelona kid? I mean, just offhand, what is the perception in those two statements? And so those are the kind of conversations that go on behind the scenes that you just want to just be aware of and leverage to your ability. And I'll give you another example. There was a lot of you guys would be too young to remember this, but there was a guy back in the mid-90s called Alexi Lalas, and he's still a broadcaster today. So he was a good player. He wasn't great. He wasn't, by any stretch of the imagination, the greatest thing to ever walk the earth, but he was a solid defender. But what he was really brilliant at was marketing, because Alexi Lalas had red hair. And so he grew it out long. He had this goatee that was down to right here. And when he was on a soccer field, it looked like a blaze of fire going everywhere. Then he went a step further. He started a band. I don't know if they were good or not. I listened to him a couple times, but I didn't really get into them. But anyways, all of a sudden he had gone from yes, he was a good player. He got on the national team, but that elevated him to where it was you couldn't help but keep noticing the guy, keep noticing. You'd be watching a TV screen, and it's this little ball of fire going everywhere, just, and a lot of it's just hair flying everywhere. But he leveraged that marketing potential. And so, as you go into tryouts, just try to look sharp, look the part, and the other thing that you want to do is you want to play within yourself. And so you have to do something to stand out at tryouts, but you don't want to stand out by trying to dribble too much or being the person that always loses the ball or what have you. You want to stand out by, being the one that links things up, that can take players on, that's confident, that's asking for the ball, that's demanding the ball. So be vocal, be confident, and then, when you get your opportunities to take them and dribble players and do the right things, and that's exactly what you want to do, but don't force anything. And so, a lot of times, I would just tell players, you would work your way into a game. Imagine you're a substitute that comes onto a field. Work your way into the game. So, your first time you touch the ball, just try to connect the pass. Okay, second time, let's try to connect the pass going forward. If it's on, if you have to go backwards, that's there too. And so what happens is every time you have a good interaction with the ball where you're doing something positive with it, your little confidence builds and builds and builds, and then you take a player on and you take an opportunity. But at the same time, that's kind of false in that regards to if your first touch on is you have to shoot the ball on goal, then you have to be ready for that too. But anyways, my point being, try to work your way into tryouts and build your confidence, and don't force it. Don't think you have to go dribble the whole team to make the team that you want to make. Okay, so we've gone through tryouts, and let's just talk a little bit about the post tryouts and what it is that we would want to do. For me, it's I always appreciate when at the end of a session a player comes up. I always shake my players' hands at the end of a session, because whether you had a good day, a bad day, a good session, a bad session, you showed up, you put in the work, and I respect that. There's a million other things you could be doing. You could be playing your iPad or your Xbox or whatever it is that you're into, but you came to the field, you put in the work, and I know if you came to one of my sessions that you got better. And that goes for thousands of coaches across the country. We're really, really lucky to have a lot of good coaches running around. But my point being is, I know you worked hard, you put in the effort, and so you deserve a handshake and to be proud. So at the end of a session, head up to the coach, shake their hand, let them know thank you guys for your time, stuff like that. That goes a long way in terms of showing that humility and that respect. A lot of times, you'll see it. Okay, players, it's time to clean up practice. Can this group get cones? This group get cones? And so you'll see 5 or 6 players that'll go over there and start doing it, and 2 or 3 players that think they're a little bit above it that'll just go start getting water and taking their gear off. And as a coach, I tend to sit back and just kind of watch that. I'm okay, that's a good player that's willing to go work hard, and that's an okay player who thinks he's a little bit better than he is and is off already getting water and going to the parking lot. Granted, I know sometimes you got to go pick up your siblings, or mom's yelling at you hey, we got to get going, I got dinner on the stove, whatever stuff comes up. But what I'm getting at on the whole is show that respect. Thank you, thanks for the tryouts, and then the other part would be let's try to close a little bit, show that initiative. And so one thing that you could say is, so what do you think? Is this going to be a good fit? How did I do in tryouts? Just two little questions like that. And like sometimes I think what you'll do, especially if you're a young player, you can have the potential to catch a coach off guard, because most will say, oh, thank you, coach, thanks for the training, and it's just like, and they want to hear something, and it's like, okay, thank you, and then it's all done. But if you ask the coach a question, you can kind of put them on the heels a little bit and say, so what did you think? And then you get your answer right then and there, and there's no waiting around, there's no hanging out by the phone. The answer is going to be what it's going to be. It's either going to be yes or no, or they might just say, we got some thinking to do, we'll see how things go, and that kind of gives your answer a little bit too. But anyways, my point is that if you show that initiative, you show that that's where you want to be, that can help you a lot there in the post tryouts. And then the final thing that I would leave you with is, like, if you don't make the team that you want to make, like, that's not the end of the world. Like, that's just flat. I mean, like, I've been cut from teams, I've been let go. I know really good players who have been drafted into the MLS who are now doing other things. It's like, that's not the end of the road. You can come back. It's especially important for young players to understand this, because the players that are good at 8, 9, 10 aren't always the players that are good at 13, 14, 15. And I'll tell you, there's an even bigger gap between the players that are good at 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. And the reasons being is that the young players, like, everybody's playing soccer, everybody's into it, and then it takes a lot of focus and and concentration not to get distracted to get to this level, to that 13, 14, 15. And so now you're having to put in that extra time, and schoolwork's starting to pile on, and homework, and then you get to that next level where now all of a sudden cars get introduced, and boys and girls, and stuff like that starts to kind of come about, and like players will say, like, oh, I'd rather like be doing my car or doing this, and so then you've got that other layer of distraction, and the players that really knuckle down at that time get ahead. So my point being is that if you don't get the result that you want today, stick with it, because it's a long game, and oftentimes the people that win this game are the ones that just don't give up and that keep working hard. And then if you also if you do get the result you want, like if you do get on that team, don't be complacent with it, like that. Be proud of it, but make sure that you work hard, and it's like, okay, I've made the team, now I want to be a starter, now I want to, and so make sure you always have that next step for yourself. All right, guys, I hope that helps. You guys do well at tryouts. Get out there and train.